Before you dive into this full breakdown, watch closely. What you're about to see isn't just a hearing. Every word, every citation, every pause is part of a strategic dismantling of repeated narratives. This isn't political theater. It's a real-time demonstration of preparation, clarity, and authority that leaves no room for misdirection. Stay tuned, because missing a single detail could mean missing the full picture. The committee room was packed, but the tension was palpable before a single word was spoken. Republicans walked in with the confidence of people who believed the narrative had already been written. They had their scripts ready, their clips cued, and their lines memorized. What they didn't realize was that the person at the other side of the dais wasn't interested in theatrics. Jasmine Crockett had prepared for this moment with the precision of someone who knew exactly how each word, each gesture, and each piece of evidence could dismantle a constructed narrative. As the gavel fell, the air shifted. GOP members launched into their rehearsed talking points, emphasizing claims meant to paint Democrats as reckless, biased, and uninformed. Crockett sat quietly, scanning the documents before her, measuring each breath, each pause. Her demeanor projected calm authority, on unspoken signal that she would let facts, not volume, dominate this hearing. The first exchange centered around Trump's conviction. GOP members pushed the familiar rhetoric: political persecution, media bias, and alleged systemic injustice. Crockett didn't respond immediately. Instead, she allowed them to speak fully, their words stacking into a narrative that seemed airtight. Then she leaned forward, her voice precise and controlled. "Let's start with the basics," she said. A jury of 12 citizens, acting independently, reviewed the evidence. Their verdict was not influenced by political pressure. It was evidence-driven and legally binding. The effect was immediate. Murmurs rippled through the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gesture wildly. She simply stated the facts, and the weight of them hung in the air like a tangible presence. The argument Republicans had relied upon for months suddenly felt flimsy. The clarity of her explanation reframed the narrative from a debate into a demonstration by carefully structuring her responses. Crockett transformed the hearing into a lesson in civic understanding. She explained the role of the judicial system, the independence of trials, and the exact processes that led to the conviction. She never attacked the individuals across the table. Instead, she dismantled the argument methodically, using logic and documented procedures as her primary weapons. The hearing's energy shifted as Republicans attempted to pivot to foreign policy. Lines about Russia's influence and the administration's foreign policy decisions were delivered with all the usual theatrics. But Crockett had anticipated each point. She responded with verified statements, official records, and documented timelines, countering each claim with a calm precision that left no room for misinterpretation. When she cited public statements by Trump and other GOP figures that contradicted the narrative being pushed, it was subtle yet devastating. Her words weren't loud, they didn't need to be. The facts spoke for themselves. At one point, a Republican tried to interject, but Crockett's measured pauses and unflinching eye contact prevented the interruption from gaining any leverage. The subtle control she maintained over pacing, emphasis, and delivery made it clear who was leading the room. The audience and cameras captured every detail: a tilted head, a slight nod, a well-timed pause. Each micro-expression reinforced authority without the need for theatrics. As the discussion deepened, Crockett moved to economic issues, specifically snap cuts and related policy decisions. She outlined the consequences of proposed cuts, citing data and case studies that highlighted their real-world impacts. The numbers she presented weren't hypothetical. They were verified, compelling, and undeniable. By framing the discussion around tangible outcomes, she shifted attention from abstract political rhetoric to real lives affected, further exposing the weakness in GOP arguments. Even as tension rose, Crockett remained composed. Each question posed to her by Republicans was answered with clarity, evidence, and precision. When they attempted to frame misleading narratives about Ukraine or Trump's foreign relations, she used publicly available intelligence reports and voting records to systematically refute their claims. The impact was cumulative. Every line of attack was met with a counterpoint grounded in indisputable fact, gradually eroding the credibility of the opposition's claims. Observers could see the transformation in the room. What began as a routine hearing intended to serve partisan talking points became an exhibition of methodical dismantling. Crockett's strategic use of pauses, measured emphasis, and factual documentation allowed her to control the narrative without confrontation. Every rebuttal was clean. Every response calculated to maximize impact without distraction. By the end of the first hour, the hearing had already shifted. The GOP's planned performance was muted by Crockett's preparation and execution. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't needed dramatic interruptions. Instead, she had created a narrative structure in which facts themselves overwhelmed opinion and speculation. Every word she spoke, every citation she referenced, reinforced the clarity, precision, and authority she brought into the room. The tension from the opening hour carried over seamlessly into the next phase. Republicans attempted to pivot, bringing up allegations of Russian influence and casting doubts on the administration's handling of foreign affairs. It was a familiar refrain, rehearsed to sound convincing, but Jasmine Crockett had anticipated every angle. She leaned forward, her gaze steady, and let the room fill with her presence before speaking. "Let's be precise," she began. "We are discussing national security. And in this context, we must rely on verified intelligence, not narratives amplified through partisan channels." Her words were deliberate, every syllable measured. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The force of logic and documented evidence did the work for her. Republicans attempted interruptions, citing select media clips. But Crockett had anticipated this too. With a quiet tap on her binder, she referenced declassified reports, citing timestamp sources, and official conclusions that contradicted every talking point they threw at her. The room fell silent. One member attempted a defense, arguing that certain narratives aligned with public statements from previous administrations. Crockett didn't engage in opinion. She focused on facts. "The statements you reference have been analyzed extensively," she said, "and official intelligence confirms that the narrative being promoted aligns with documented foreign disinformation. We cannot debate reality with conjecture." The subtle but undeniable weight of her statement shifted the energy in the room. Staffers glanced at each other. Journalists typed rapidly, and cameras captured every controlled reaction. It wasn't theatrics. It was strategy. Each citation, each pause, each measured word reinforced the clarity of her position while eroding the credibility of opposition claims. She moved to timelines next, exposing contradictions between statements made by GOP members and the sequence of documented events. Every claim about policy decisions, aid, or sanctions was countered with precise dates and corroborated evidence. The effect was cumulative. The more they attempted to create a narrative, the more the factual record exposed holes and inconsistencies. By mid-session, Crockett transitioned seamlessly to Ukraine-related discussions. Republicans had tried to frame the administration as weak or negligent, but she methodically broke down each accusation. She referenced official congressional reports, intelligence assessments, and public records to show where prior decisions had been informed by strategic analysis, and where partisan claims fell apart under scrutiny. Each rebuttal was calm, yet devastating in its simplicity. She didn't need dramatic flourishes or rhetorical attacks. The power lay in presenting a structured argument grounded in undeniable facts. Even attempts to deflect attention by pointing to media interpretation were handled with quiet authority. "Media speculation does not replace documentation," she said. punctuating her point with a reference to a specific sourced report. Throughout the session, Crockett maintained a rhythm that was both methodical and relentless. Every talking point the opposition attempted to repeat, recycle, or escalate was met with the same precise approach: identify the claim, counter it with verified evidence, and reinforce clarity. There was no anger, no shouting, only the measured force of preparation meeting opportunity. Observers noted the subtle dynamics at play. GOP members were visibly frustrated, caught between their rehearsed lines and the weight of indisputable facts. The audience could see the cracks forming in the narrative before them. Reporters in the back row exchanged looks that reflected disbelief and admiration simultaneously. Cameras focused on every micro-expression, capturing how a single, methodical approach could dominate a room full of political theater. Crockett's effectiveness wasn't in dramatics, it was in precision and control. By focusing on exact language, documented sources, and structured reasoning, she created an environment where misinformation could not thrive. Each pause she allowed was intentional, giving the weight of reality time to resonate, while forcing her opponents into defensive positions they weren't prepared for. By the end of the second hour, the room had transformed. What had started as a routine, expected partisan clash had become a display of meticulous, fact-driven dismantling. Crockett had systematically neutralized every foreign policy attack, every Russian narrative attempt, and every effort to manipulate perception. The hearing now served as a demonstration not just of her knowledge, but of her ability to control narrative space using facts as her primary weapon. The third phase of the hearing intensified as Jasmine Crockett shifted the focus to domestic and foreign policy intersections. Republicans attempted to pivot, questioning the administration's commitment to Ukraine while linking it to broader economic issues at home. They framed the conversation with sweeping statements suggesting mismanagement, incompetence, and negligence. But Crockett didn't react with emotion. She responded with structured, precise, and verifiable points that left no space for ambiguity. "Let's examine the record," she began, her tone calm yet unwavering. "Congressional reports and official documentation show a consistent, strategic approach to Ukraine aid. Every allocation, every delay, every modification was documented, transparent, and aligned with international commitments." She methodically cited dates, committee reports, and official statements, each one chosen to illustrate contradictions in the GOP narrative. The opposition tried to interject, but Crockett's pauses and deliberate phrasing maintained control. Each interruption was met with a measured redirection back to verifiable evidence. It was clear she wasn't debating opinion. She was confronting reality. The conversation soon transitioned to domestic issues, specifically the SNAP program. Republicans attempted to paint the Democrats as careless with federal spending, alleging policy cuts would devastate vulnerable communities. Crockett dismantled these claims with precision. "Let's focus on actual outcomes, not speculative projections," she said. She presented case studies, statistical reports, and past funding analyses that clearly showed the real-world impacts of SNAP decisions, highlighting how Republican proposals would have resulted in measurable harm to families across multiple states by interweaving domestic and foreign policy. Crockett demonstrated not just knowledge, but narrative mastery. She linked Ukraine aid and domestic economic policy to a cohesive framework, exposing where the GOP had created a disjointed, misleading picture. The room began to realize the depth of preparation she brought to the hearing. Every talking point from the opposition had a counterweight, irrefutable evidence, delivered with clarity and authority. As the discussion deepened, Crockett turned attention to media narratives and public perception. Republicans had attempted to leverage misinterpretations in the press to bolster their claims. Crockett's response was surgical. She identified specific misquotes, clarified timelines, and presented original source material. "We cannot accept misrepresentation as evidence," she said. Her approach was calm but devastating, turning what the opposition hoped would appear as confusion into an example of disciplined accountability. By mid-session, Crockett addressed repeated claims about administrative negligence in Ukraine's strategy. Each allegation was countered with precise details from congressional oversight reports, showing a clear chain of decisions, approvals, and documented strategic rationale. The room grew increasingly tense. Staffers and committee members alike were forced to reckon with facts they could not ignore. Crockett's method wasn't confrontation, it was methodical exposure. The final phase of this segment involved the intersection of misinformation and political misdirection. Republicans attempted to tie domestic economic policies to foreign policy failures, creating a narrative designed to confuse the public. Crockett systematically dismantled the connections, presenting parallel timelines and verified documentation that exposed the inconsistencies. Her delivery was calm, authoritative, and relentless. Each rebuttal landed like a weighty gavel, reinforcing her command over both content and narrative. By the end of the third hour, observers could see a dramatic transformation in the room. The GOP's scripted attacks, once loud and confident, had been reduced to tentative, reactive statements. Crockett's approach, facts first, evidence-driven, methodical, had not just neutralized talking points, but turned the hearing into a live demonstration of accountability, precision, and clarity. Every word, every citation, every pause was a lesson in controlling a room, through substance rather than spectacle, as the hearing progressed toward its final stretch. The atmosphere reflected an undeniable truth. The prepared, factual, and disciplined approach of one representative had successfully countered months of orchestrated misinformation. Crockett's meticulous documentation, calm authority, and strategic pacing had turned what was expected to be another routine political theater into a case study of methodical dismantling, an example of how preparation and clarity can overwhelm theatrics, repetition, and misdirection. As the hearing approached its final hour, the tension in the room was palpable. Republican members had grown visibly frustrated, their rehearsed lines failing to land against Crockett's meticulous, evidence-driven responses. They pivoted again, now attempting to conflate domestic policy with allegations of administrative overreach, hoping to muddy the waters. Crockett's focus, however, remained unshaken. Her preparation was comprehensive and her delivery precise, leaving no room for misdirection. "Let's be clear," she began, projecting a calm authority that cut through the tension. "Claims about mismanagement must be substantiated with actual evidence, not assumption or selective quotations." Her approach was systematic. Each accusation was deconstructed with precision, exposing gaps, contradictions, and unsupported narratives. When Republicans attempted to introduce anecdotes or media reports to support their claims, Crockett countered with original source documentation, highlighting discrepancies and reinforcing a consistent, factual baseline. The contrast between speculative assertion and grounded fact became starkly evident to everyone present. The discussion moved into the intersection of foreign affairs and domestic repercussions. Republicans tried to argue that decisions regarding international aid had negatively impacted vulnerable communities at home. Crockett dismantled the argument with methodical clarity, citing verified funding reports, congressional oversight analyses, and case studies demonstrating the actual impacts. Each counterpoint was delivered in measured tones, yet it carried the force of undeniable evidence, leaving the opposition scrambling to respond. Attention then shifted to the issue of public accountability. Republicans attempted to frame certain communications and policy proposals as evidence of secrecy or malfeasance. Crockett systematically exposed the flaws in these narratives, demonstrating transparency in decision-making processes and providing documented proof of consultations. timelines, and approvals. Every point was anchored in verifiable sources, leaving no room for misleading interpretations. The room recognized the thoroughness of her preparation. Even seasoned observers noted the level of detail she navigated without hesitation. A pivotal moment occurred when members attempted to conflate her rebuttals as evasive. Crockett's response was elegant in its simplicity. She clarified each point, referenced exact sources, and maintained a tone of calm authority. Evasion requires ambiguity. "I am here to provide clarity," she stated, underscoring the contrast between fact-based governance and partisan conjecture. Her precision effectively neutralized attempts to shift focus or cast doubt on her. Credibility, the hearing's final phase. Emphasized pattern recognition linking. Repeated GOP narratives to long-standing misinformation campaigns. Crockett demonstrated how recurring claims had been fact-checked, refuted, and documented in public records, exposing the systematic nature of repeated misinformation attempts. By tracing each claim back to its source and showing inconsistencies, she created a narrative structure in which falsehoods could not survive scrutiny. Observers could see the cumulative effect: a once confident opposition struggling to adapt, confronted by unwavering, structured evidence. Throughout, Crockett maintained poise, authority, and control of pacing. Each rebuttal was timed for maximum impact, every citation chosen to reinforce credibility. She seamlessly wove domestic and foreign policy issues, economic analysis, and intelligence findings into a coherent narrative, leaving the hearing transformed from a partisan spectacle into a live demonstration of discipline. Accountability as the gavel approached the end. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Republican talking points, repeated for months, lay exposed against a framework of unassailable evidence. The carefully curated narratives that had been designed to intimidate, confuse, or mislead were rendered ineffective. Every question posed to Crockett, no matter how leading or provocative, was met with precision, clarity, and documented fact. By the close of the session, the impact was undeniable. The hearing had begun as a routine partisan exchange, but concluded as a masterclass in methodical dismantling of narratives, highlighting the power of preparation, clarity, and evidence-driven discourse. Crockett had controlled the narrative through knowledge and composure, leaving an indelible mark on the proceedings. The outcome was not a partisan victory, but a testament to disciplined strategy, factual rigor, and unwavering authority.